Second to climate change, waste is the largest environmental concern facing the modern world. Much of the waste we produce isn't handled properly, and the bigger issue is the industrialisation and consumption that it represents. In general, people create more waste when they move to cities, and the amount of people moving to cities is projected to surge in the coming century.
To my mind, you can come up with any sort of space-aged ideas that haven't been invented yet and say, well, that would be brilliant. You know, if everything could be held in some sort of a force field and you didn't have to have anything around, you know, you just got into your force field where you went. To my mind, in reality, in today's world, it's a scenario of saying, right, do I need the latest whatever? Is it really going to fulfill my needs if I have the latest pair of jeans because I have 9 pairs of jeans already? Do I really need them? To move away from the idea of just continually consuming for the sake of consuming. And then secondly to that is packaging itself, because a lot of the waste industry, there's a lot of packaging involved, and it's a matter of manufacturers and producers to say, look, do we really need this? Do we really have to have it? It's to remove the unnecessary packaging, because if you remove it, it's not there, it doesn't exist. But you have an entire industry built on that existing. So you're into global economics.
In the past, before the advent of recycling programmes, most UK households sent 100% of their waste to landfills. However, over the years, and particularly during the past decade, the UK has spent millions of pounds developing a strong recycling network and raising public awareness. What's more, policy has played a driving role in shaping the UK waste recycling industry.
If you go back then, and then wasn't that long ago, waste was just handled as genuinely take it away from my door and throw it away. From that perspective, with the change in legislation and the change in regulations of waste and the change in how waste producers are instructed as to how they are meant to handle their waste, it made a change within the industry that you just cannot continue to throw things away. You just cannot continue to take material to the dump, as it were. That was outside of any value there was in material. For instance, scrap was always recycled because there was always a recognised value in scrap metal. But from the point of view of a lot of other wastes, it's only with the development of landfill tax where the government recognised this and says, look, we're going to have to increase tax in order to make it viable for a recycling market to grow from this. At the time, going back then, getting rid of waste in a landfill was not an expensive service. It wasn't expensive to do. Landfill tax was fairly low. Gate fees into the landfills were also fairly low. So therefore, it was the cheapest common denominator. So in order to try and develop a recycling business or a recycling industry from that, it didn't add up commercially. So with the influence of landfill tax from the government, from the years, I can go back, in the last maybe 10, 12, 15 years, landfill tax has continually grown and grown and grown and doubled and doubled and doubled to an extent where it makes commercial value to look at material and say, right, we don't throw this in the landfill anymore. It's commercially viable to recycle that material.
The need to maximise productivity and minimise cost has driven the sector towards digitisation, largely in the form of automation. With increased volumes of materials being recycled every day, plants need to ensure that sortation is as automated and streamlined as possible to avoid downtime.
Total waste management, a lot of companies are moving towards the model or the method of total waste management because they like to have a single service for all their waste needs. So they like to be able to make one call to one contractor to service all. To take it on a grander scale, it's the type of model Amazon are using. If Amazon had their way, you would contact Amazon and they would provide everything to you. And Tesco's and et cetera, they're all growing the same type of model. In total waste management, it's a scenario where as a producer of material, if you go with a provider that can provide you with total waste management, you make one call and that provider meets your needs or gives you the requisite requirements that you need to take their waste away. Secondary to that, probably primary to that on some occasions, is the responsibility of that provider, such as ourselves, the legitimacy of the waste, the legitimacy of how it's handled, the legitimacy of where it goes and how it's processed. So hand in hand with total waste management, you get all your returns of information, all your data, all your consignment notes, all your duty of care notes, all your documentation to prove that that waste has been handled and treated and processed in a legal manner. Again, going back on my previous question, as the rate of landfill increased, as the price of landfill increased, then the option for getting material processed illegally crept into the market. So by providing companies with a total waste management service, they recognise that companies such as ourselves, there are others out there, are legitimate, they are licensed, they are accredited, they are approved, they have all their necessary licenses and approvals in place from the regulator. So when the regulator comes to regulate them with regard to what they're doing with their waste, where it's going, they as a waste producer can turn to us and say, you're our total waste management partner, can you provide us with the information that we need to give the regulator what they require in order to be able to return the information to them that our waste is being handled in a legal manner, because we make this, we don't handle waste. You guys handle waste, therefore you satisfy that need.
Surveys indicate that almost everyone in Great Britain says that they care about the environment, but almost half of them feel they could recycle more than they currently do. This is despite almost 3/4 of the British public thinking their local council makes it relatively easy for them to recycle. This could be because people simply don't have the time to sort out their recycling, or rather that waste at a household level isn't perceived as a valuable resource.
What you find in the markets is it's driven by demand. So if you take something like cardboard, and you want to trend cardboard go back over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and you'll find the trend as in the value of that commodity. So there's a commodities market for this, and recycled cardboard will be, as you go to the metals market, it's the same. You can go to aluminium, steel, or whatever, it does the same. So as there's a demand for raw product, the demand for the waste product or the recycled product will increase because there's not enough of the raw product. As there's less of a demand for the raw product, there's more raw product, they won't want the recycled product, so the recycled product value decreases. So it sort of runs in trends, as in the recycled material will gain value or decrease in value as the raw material gains value or decreases in value. That's not true all across the board, but by and large, that tends to be the trend. So again, because it's got a finite value to it, if you take plastics, and there are certain plastics that are valuable plastics, PET, milk cartons, they're valuable plastics. So when you take your PET material out and you recycle that, there's a cost in actually separating that PET from all the other plastics. If the value of PET falls, there'll be an equilibrium point where you will say, it's not commercially viable for us to separate this material. So therefore, we'll not process it accordingly. We will just let it go with all the other plastic streams. So it depends on the back end value of the material that you're processing as to whether it is or isn't worthwhile separating out or segregating or recycling the mixed material that comes in. From the point of view of, again, if you go back 15 years, everyone had one bin at their house and everything went into that one bin. So if you went back to that ethos today and said, okay, we want to recycle this material, it'd be virtually impossible, because there would be that much work to try and get through the material that's in the bin to get to the proper recycle it. It just wouldn't be commercially viable. So therefore, what the councils have done, if you're looking at domestics, is say, right, we're going to separate off our glass, because if we keep glass to one side, it's a clean stream. Glass is glass and can be separated and managed as glass. We're going to put all our recyclates into a bin. I'm only going by my own house done. I'm going to put my recyclates into the bin. So in that bin, we'll have cardboard, we could have milk cartons, we could have plastic butter tubs, we could have yogurt pots, etc., etc. So they'll go into that bin. And then you still have your black, we also have a brown bin for your garden cuttings and your composting, etc., because that can be composted. And similarly, then you've got your black bin. What we have found over time is the volume of material being produced in the black bin is less and less and less, because a lot of the material is recyclable. So therefore, if you take your brown bin, which has got your compost material in, yeah, it's made into compost, it's recyclable. Take your glass, yeah, your glass is recycled, goes to a recycling facility, and then is brought back into virgin cullet, and then fed back into the glass industry. And then that takes your bin, which is your recyclables bin. your recyclables bin, a high percentage of that is recycled, because what you've done there is you've source segregated the material into streams that you're able to go, yeah, I can feed that up a line. It's commercially viable to pick that material off a picking line, to separate off the recyclates from that, and we're left with less and less material that actually goes for back-end disposal. Lastly then, what you have is similarly your old black bin. But your old black bin has less and less material in it because there's more and more material can go down the different recyclate route. But to go back to your previous question with regard to the plastics, it really depends on the commercial value of that material as to whether it's worthwhile separating it and recycling. So it's the markets that demand or decree whether there is or there isn't a value for that.
Apart from households, companies are embracing recycling as they're finding real business value in reducing waste. There is a clear connection between the better use of resources and direct cost savings, such as where materials are used more effectively or assets are used for longer periods. This value has been on the table for a long time, yet it's only recently, in the past 20 years, that business action has appeared to be seriously accelerating. In part, this is due to resource cost increases, but regulation, particularly European regulation, has also had a big role to play.
There's a whole industry for it. If you take paper as an example, you get recycled paper mills that just work on recycled paper, and they just continually process paper. You go back into 60s, 70s, 80s, I don't believe they existed. So you have entire industries that have grown from the recycling industry. To say, we mentioned about plastics, there's a lot of plastics are fully recyclable. They can be brought in, cleaned, dried, regranulated, and then made into new product again. The primary one you have is, you've seen it before, where you have the plastic bottles, and then they're transformed into the fleeces. So they are, and they're able to be made back into the virgin product glass. You take your glass, you bring it in, you wash it, you shred it, you break it down into a specific piece size, you take it to a glass processor again, or a glass manufacturer, and they'll feed that back in and make new glass bottles.
In order to completely throw away our throwaway society, we must continue to go further as a country to reduce, reuse and recycle. For waste management companies, fast and efficient processing of waste through highly sophisticated automated sorting solutions is going to be key to helping the sector continue to meet targets and remain nationally and globally competitive. UK waste policies must operate based on shared responsibility. Everyone produces some quantity of waste, so everyone has a part to play in preventing further waste growth from poor waste management. All parts of society have a responsibility to reuse, recycle and dispose of waste properly.
There's no culprit. The culprit in it all is the general public. That's how they live their lives. You go into anyone's wardrobe today, as in their clothing wardrobe, and you'll open up a wardrobe and say, well, okay, you have 6 pairs of jeans. Do you need 6 pairs of jeans? It's to try and blame industry, I think, is wrong. Industry are there, in my eyes, to feed a need. It's like trying to blame the waste industry on the waste. We're there to feed, we're there to process and to manage something that has been produced by everybody in the street. So it's not right to say, oh yeah, it's this industry or this industry or this industry that is accountable for this. It's not, it's modern culture. That's what's accountable for it. I can see it changing, I can see it changing, but whether it'll change quickly enough, I don't know. But to give a typical adage that if you take everyone in Western society, go and open your wardrobe at home, take a look at it, look at the clothes, do you need all that? That to my mind answers it all. I don't need it, but I want it.